We're not here to entertain fantasies from nobodies." The words cut through the conference room like a blade, leaving stunned silence in their wake. James Chen, clutching his prototype in trembling hands, stood frozen before the semicircle of Silicon Valley's elite. 26 years old, wearing a store-bought suit that suddenly felt 2 sizes too small, he faced the smirking venture capitalist who had just dismissed 3 years of his life's work in a single sentence. In the back of the room, a figure in a simple black t-shirt stopped scrolling on his phone. The Emerging Technologies Summit was the most exclusive gathering in tech, invitation only, no press allowed, where the future was decided behind closed doors. Billionaires, CEOs, and the architects of tomorrow's world sat in ergonomic chairs worth more than James's monthly rent. The chandelier-lit ballroom of the Four-Seasons Silicon Valley glittered with wealth and power. Every person here controlled enough capital to launch James's neural interface project 100 times over. Every person, that is, except James himself, who had snuck in using a borrowed service badge. "Perhaps Mr. Chen doesn't understand how innovation actually works," continued Victor Reinhardt, the silver-haired investor whose fund had backed half the unicorns in the valley. "Real breakthroughs come from established labs, not garages." Laughter rippled through the audience. James's ears burned as he tried to speak, but Reinhardt spoke over him. "Security can show you out." As a suited guard approached, movement from the back row caught everyone's attention. Elon Musk stood up, his expression unreadable. "Actually," he said, silencing the room instantly, "I'd like to hear more." The room transformed instantly. 200 heads turned in perfect synchronization, watching as Elon Musk made his way down the aisle. He moved with that characteristic casualness that seemed almost out of place among the tailor-made Italian suits and designer dresses. His black t-shirt and jeans were a stark contrast to the formal attire surrounding him, yet somehow he was the one who belonged most. James stood frozen, his prototype, a sleek headband with nearly invisible neural sensors, still clutched in his sweating hands. He had read everything Musk had ever written, watched every interview, studied every product launch. In his tiny apartment, plastered with diagrams and circuit designs, hung a single framed quote, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Victor Reinhardt's confident smirk faltered as Musk approached the front of the room. The venture capitalist straightened his Rolex watch with a nervous flick of his wrist. The guards who had been moving toward James hesitated, looking to Reinhardt for direction. The whispers began to spread through the audience, executives leaning toward each other, wondering what had caught the interest of the world's most unpredictable innovator. "Continue," Musk said simply, taking a seat in the front row and gesturing to James. "What problem are you solving?" James took a deep breath, steadying his hands. This was the moment he had dreamed about, but never truly believed would come. The prototype felt lighter now as he raised it. "This is Neuralace," he began, his voice finding strength. "A non-invasive brain-computer interface that requires no surgery, no implants, yet achieves 95% of the efficiency of invasive techniques." The technical words flowed easier than small talk ever had for him. "It uses a new type of quantum sensor I developed that can read neural activity through the skull with unprecedented precision." Reinhardt cleared his throat dramatically. "Mr. Musk, while we appreciate your interest, we've all seen these BCI proposals before. They promise the world and deliver nothing but investor disappointment." "Have you tested it?" Musk asked James directly, ignoring Reinhardt completely. "Yes, on myself," James tapped his temple, "for the past 18 months. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Self-experimentation was either the mark of a madman or a true believer. The dividing line was success. "And?" Musk leaned forward slightly, his intense focus palpable. "I can control complex systems with thought alone, computers, smart home devices, even early prototype vehicles. James allowed himself a small smile. "I can show you." The atmosphere in the room shifted again as James placed the neural band around his head. The sleek device looked almost like a fashionable accessory rather than revolutionary technology. He connected it wirelessly to the conference room's systems. "May I use the presentation screen?" he asked, gaining confidence with each passing second. Reinhardt started to object, but another venture capitalist, sensing which way the wind was blowing with Musk's interest, quickly overrode him. "By all means." James closed his eyes briefly. The massive screen behind him sprang to life. Without touching a device, without speaking a command, he began navigating through his presentation. Slides changed, videos played, 3D models rotated, all directed by his thoughts alone. The precision was flawless, the response instantaneous. The room fell completely silent. Even Reinhardt couldn't maintain his dismissive expression as James demonstrated controlling multiple systems simultaneously, bringing up technical specifications while manipulating 3D models of the human brain, all while keeping the room's lighting and temperature controls dancing to his mental commands. Musk's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed his intensity. He was calculating, assessing, measuring in that unique way that had revolutionized multiple industries. "How close are you to production?" he asked finally. Before James could answer, Reinhardt found his voice again. "This is impossible," he declared. "A parlor trick. There must be an assistant controlling things remotely." James felt his heart sink as Reinhardt's accusation hung in the air. He had expected skepticism, but not outright allegations of fraud. Before he could defend himself, Musk stood up. "If it's a trick," Musk said evenly, "it's a good one." He turned to address Reinhardt directly. "And if it's real, Victor, it's exactly what you claim doesn't exist anymore. A breakthrough from outside the system." Reinhardt's face flushed red. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not in front of the entire Silicon Valley elite. "With all due respect, Elon, even you had institutional backing when you started. PayPal wasn't built in someone's bedroom." "Actually," Musk countered with a slight smile, "my first company was built in a rented office where I also slept because I couldn't afford an apartment. I showered at the YMCA." He turned back to James. "But this isn't about me. I want to understand how you've solved the signal degradation problem that's plagued non-invasive BCIs." James's fingers traced the edge of his device. The breakthrough was in quantum coherence maintenance across the bone barrier. Everyone's been trying to amplify the signal or filter the noise. I took a different approach, using entangled particles to maintain information integrity regardless of physical barriers. A woman in the third row, the CTO of a major neuroscience company, leaned forward. "That's theoretically impossible with current technology." "Current commercial technology," James corrected respectfully. "I developed a room temperature quantum maintenance circuit that costs less than $50 to manufacture at scale." The room erupted in competing voices, some dismissive, others curious, many simply confused by the technical jargon. Reinhardt seized the moment, raising his voice above the others. "This is absurd. Quantum coherence across biological barriers? Next, he'll be claiming he's solved nuclear fusion in his bathtub." Laughter rippled through sections of the audience, restoring Reinhardt's confidence. "I've evaluated over 3,000 pitches in my career. I know snake oil when I see it." Musk remained unmoved. "Let's test it," he suggested, the simple statement silencing the room once more. "What do you propose?" James asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Musk surveyed the room thoughtfully. "You claim your device allows precise control of systems. Let's put that to the test with something that couldn't possibly be pre-programmed." He pulled out his phone. "My team has a prototype vehicle outside. If you can interface with its systems and drive it around the parking lot using only your thoughts, that would be compelling evidence. Reinhardt scoffed. This is turning into a circus. This is due diligence, Victor, replied a venture capitalist from the second row. Something you seem curiously eager to avoid on this particular technology. Whispers again circulated through the room as the implication hung in the air. Was Reinhardt's dismissiveness mere arrogance, or was there something else motivating his hostility? Several attendees were already checking their phones, looking up their portfolios and connections to Reinhardt's fund. I'm happy to demonstrate, James said, finding his voice, but I'll need 5 minutes to configure the interface for a new system. The conference room buzzed with excitement as Musk made a quick call. Within minutes, security was clearing a path through the Four Seasons Grand Lobby, the entire assembly of tech elites following James and Musk outside like a procession of modern royalty. Smartphones emerged despite the no photography rule, executives eager to document what was either going to be a spectacular failure or a historic moment. In the parking lot waited a sleek prototype vehicle, not a Tesla, but something more experimental, with no visible steering wheel or dashboard controls. One of Musk's engineers approached with a tablet, which he handed to James. These are the basic interface protocols, the engineer explained. Our system usually requires specialized hardware access. James nodded, connecting his neural device to the tablet. His fingers flew across the screen, his face locked in intense concentration. Around him, the crowd had formed a semicircle, with Reinhardt prominently positioned near Musk, his arms crossed skeptically. This is a waste of everyone's valuable time, he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. After 4 minutes of rapid coding, James looked up from the tablet. I'm ready. His voice carried more confidence than he had ever felt in his life. He handed the tablet back to Musk's engineer and walked toward the vehicle, the neural interface band gleaming on his forehead. What exactly will you demonstrate? Asked a voice from the crowd, the CEO of a major autonomous vehicle company. Full control, James replied simply. Acceleration, steering, braking, all with my thoughts alone. The car's doors opened automatically as James approached. He settled into the passenger seat, the side that would normally be a non-driver position, leaving the driver's seat conspicuously empty. This was deliberate stagecraft. Everyone would clearly see that no physical controls were being used. For safety reasons, Musk announced to the gathering, we've limited the vehicle's speed capabilities and restricted its operational area to this parking lot. Otherwise, the control systems are standard. James closed his eyes briefly, establishing the neural connection. The car's systems appeared in his mind like a three-dimensional interface: acceleration, steering, environmental controls, all accessible through targeted thoughts. He opened his eyes and looked at the assembled crowd through the vehicle's window. Among the skeptical faces, he noted several showing genuine curiosity. Reinhardt, however, looked positively smug, already preparing for James's failure. The vehicle hummed to life. Slowly, smoothly, it began to move forward, rolling away from the crowd before executing a perfect turn. James kept his hands visible on his lap, making it clear he wasn't secretly controlling the vehicle through hidden mechanisms. The car accelerated, navigating between parked vehicles with precision, then performed a textbook three-point turn in a tight space. Gasps and murmurs spread through the observers. The car drove back toward them, stopped precisely in front of Musk, and flashed its lights in a clearly intentional pattern. Can anyone suggest a driving pattern? James called out through the open window. Something unpredictable that couldn't have been pre-programmed? Reinhardt stepped forward, a final challenge in his eyes. Figure eights, he said. Around those two palm trees, alternate clockwise and counterclockwise, then parallel park between those two SUVs. He pointed to a tight spot that would challenge even an experienced human driver. James nodded once. Watch carefully, he said. knowing his life was about to change forever. The prototype vehicle moved with dancer-like precision, accelerating smoothly toward the first palm tree. Everyone watched in stunned silence as it traced a perfect figure 8, maintaining consistent speed throughout the maneuver. Without pause, it reversed direction for the second loop, the counterclockwise movement just as flawless as the first. James sat motionless in the passenger seat, his hands visible, his eyes focused forward, the neural band the only connection between his mind and the machine. After completing the figure 8s, the vehicle approached the tight parking space Reinhardt had indicated. The gap between the two SUVs appeared impossibly narrow, barely 6 inches of clearance on either side. A seasoned driver would hesitate before attempting such a maneuver. The car slowed, positioned itself, and executed a textbook parallel parking move, sliding perfectly into the space with millimeter precision. A spontaneous round of applause broke out among the onlookers. Even hardened tech executives couldn't hide their amazement. Smartphone cameras captured everything, despite the summit's no-recording policy. This moment would be Silicon Valley legend by nightfall. The vehicle reversed out of the parking space and returned to its starting position in front of the crowd. James stepped out, his face flushed with vindication, but maintaining a professional composure. "That's impossible," Reinhardt muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. His confident facade had cracked, revealing genuine confusion and fear. There must be some trick. Musk approached James, examining the neural interface band with undisguised curiosity. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the device. James carefully removed the band and handed it to Musk, who turned it over in his hands, studying the construction. The quantum components were elegantly integrated, the entire device remarkably lightweight. "You built this yourself?" Musk asked, his tone making it clear he already knew the answer. "Yes, in my apartment. It's the 18th iteration." Musk nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. 18 failures before success. That sounds familiar. Reinhardt pushed his way forward, his composure regained, but his eyes betraying his agitation. A cute demonstration, but hardly commercial technology. The liability issues alone would be insurmountable, not to mention the security concerns. He turned to the crowd, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Who wants their brain exposed to hacking, or their car controlled by a random neural spike during a moment of road rage? Before James could respond, another voice spoke up, the neuroscience CTO, who had questioned him earlier. "Those are valid concerns," she said, "but they're engineering problems, not conceptual flaws. If this technology works as demonstrated, those issues can be addressed in development." She looked at James with professional respect. "What safeguards have you already implemented?" James recognized a lifeline when he saw one. 3 layers of protection, he explained, gaining confidence. First, a physical quantum encryption layer that makes remote hacking mathematically impossible without matching entangled particles. Second, intention verification that distinguishes between fleeting thoughts and deliberate commands. Third, a hierarchical permission structure that requires progressive levels of conscious authorization for critical functions. As he spoke, James could see the expressions changing among the executives. They were no longer viewing him as an interloper, but as a serious innovator. All except Reinhardt, whose face had hardened into a mask of diplomatic professionalism that barely concealed his hostility. "Very impressive theoretically," Reinhardt conceded with false politeness. "But let's be realistic about the path forward. Technology like this, if it passes proper scientific scrutiny, belongs with established players who have the resources to develop it responsibly." He placed a hand on James's shoulder with patronizing familiarity. "My fund would be happy to connect you with appropriate partners who could acquire your IP for further development." The offer was clear: surrender the technology, take a payout, and disappear. Musk, who had been quietly observing the exchange, handed the neural band back to James. "Before you consider any offers," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think we should discuss alternatives." The crowd parted as Musk guided James a few steps away from Reinhardt, creating just enough distance for semi-private conversation while remaining visible to all. The message was unmistakable. Musk was publicly aligning himself with the young innovator. "What you've created," Musk said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby, "isn't just another incremental improvement. It's a fundamental breakthrough." He glanced back at Reinhardt. "And it doesn't belong buried in some corporate lab where it can be controlled, patented into oblivion, or shelved to protect existing product lines." Reinhardt stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "That's rich coming from someone who's built multiple corporations." "Not everything is a conspiracy to suppress innovation, Elon. Sometimes expertise and resources are actually necessary to bring ideas to market." "You're right," Musk replied calmly. "Resources are necessary." He turned back to James. "That's why I'm prepared to offer you a development partnership, not an acquisition. Your company, your technology, your vision, with the manufacturing infrastructure and capital to make it real." A collective gasp moved through the crowd. Direct offers like this were never made publicly, especially not from someone of Musk's stature. The implications were enormous, not just for James and his technology, but for the entire ecosystem of how innovation was funded and developed in Silicon Valley. "This is highly irregular," Reinhardt protested, looking around for support. But the other investors and executives were already calculating the new reality. If Musk was backing this technology, everything changed. James stood at the center of a moment he could never have imagined. His years of solitary work, the sleepless nights, the maxed-out credit cards, the doubts, all culminating in this pivotal choice. "I didn't create Neuralace to get rich or to sell out," he said finally, his voice steady. "I built it because direct neural interfaces can transform human capability, help people with disabilities, and accelerate our collective problem-solving capacity. I just need the chance to make that vision real." Musk nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's exactly why you shouldn't hand it over to become just another corporate asset." He extended his hand. "Partners?" The entire tech elite of Silicon Valley watched as James Chen, the outsider who had crashed their exclusive summit, reached out and shook Elon Musk's hand. "Partners." Reinhardt's face darkened with barely controlled fury as his smartphone began buzzing with incoming messages. News was already spreading beyond the Four Seasons parking lot. The venture capitalist who had staked his reputation on dismissing James was now watching his influence diminish in real time. 3 hours later, the Emerging Technology Summit had transformed into something entirely different. The rigid schedule of presentations had been abandoned as executives, scientists, and investors clustered around James and his revolutionary interface. The ballroom buzzed with excitement as he answered questions, demonstrated additional capabilities, and explained the core technological breakthroughs in more detail. Reinhardt had disappeared shortly after the parking lot demonstration, citing urgent business matters that everyone understood was damage control. His final glare at James had communicated everything. He had made a powerful enemy today. But he had also gained a more powerful ally. Musk remained nearby, occasionally joining technical discussions, but mostly observing how James handled himself among the Silicon Valley elite. The young innovator had shed his initial nervousness completely, speaking with the quiet confidence of someone who knew their creation would change the world. "You realize what happened today, don't you?" Musk said quietly, during a momentary lull in the conversations. James looked at him questioningly. "You've just rewritten the rules," Musk continued, "not just with your technology, but with how innovation can emerge. Tomorrow, there will be thousands of researchers and developers who suddenly believe they don't need institutional backing to create the future. The summit's closing dinner had been hastily reconfigured. James found himself seated at the head table, a place originally reserved for Reinhardt and other established leaders. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Beside him sat Musk, along with 3 other tech luminaries who had expressed interest in supporting the neural interface's development. "We're already receiving partnership inquiries," Musk informed him, scrolling through messages on his phone. "Medical applications, educational systems, accessibility solutions for disabled users. Your technology has implications across dozens of industries." James nodded, still processing the day's events. "I always knew it could help people in countless ways. That's what kept me going when everyone said it was impossible." Across the room, several attendees who had laughed at James earlier were now watching him intently, their expressions a mix of calculation and regret. The venture capital world was ruthlessly meritocratic in its own way. Today's embarrassment could become tomorrow's desperate attempt to join a funding round. "The hardest part begins now," Musk cautioned. "Reinhardt and others like him won't simply accept this disruption to their power structure. They'll try to regulate you, litigate you, or acquire competitors to block you." "So we move faster than they can," James replied, surprising himself with his boldness. "We open source the core technology while commercializing the applications." Musk's eyes lit up. "Exactly. Make it too valuable for the world to allow anyone to suppress it." 6 months later, James stood on a much larger stage. The convention center was packed with thousands of developers, medical professionals, and technology enthusiasts. Behind him, a massive screen displayed a global map dotted with light points representing the neural interface's adoption across the world. "Today we're releasing the 3rd generation of Neuralace," James announced to thunderous applause. "With enhanced capabilities, medical certification in 27 countries, and a price point that makes it accessible to research institutions worldwide." In the front row sat Elon Musk, alongside the partners who had helped make this moment possible. Their unprecedented collaboration had broken every Silicon Valley rule about how breakthrough technologies should be developed and commercialized. "The true power of innovation isn't in who controls it," James continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had faced down the gatekeepers and won. "It's in who can benefit from it." As if to demonstrate this point, the side doors of the auditorium opened. A group of individuals in wheelchairs entered, each wearing the sleek neural band. Without touching joysticks or controls, they navigated smoothly down the aisles using thought alone, their freedom of movement restored by the technology. "This is just the beginning," James said, his eyes meeting Musk's briefly in shared understanding. "True breakthroughs have never come from protecting the status quo. They come from those brave enough to imagine a different world and stubborn enough to build it." The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. In the back of the auditorium, unnoticed by most, Victor Reinhardt watched silently before turning to leave. His investment fund had posted its first negative returns in 15 years, while the open partnership between James Chen and Elon Musk had become the new model that ambitious innovators everywhere were rushing to emulate. The revolution hadn't just been in neural interface technology, it had been in proving that genuine innovation could still come from anywhere, that the future wasn't the exclusive property of those who already controlled the present. And that was a far more dangerous idea to the established order than any technology could ever be.